Oral questions. Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to give the Premier another opportunity to accept our offer of assistance in examining the response to the ice storm. Now that he's had a couple of days for reflection and to receive feedback, will the Premier change his mind? Will he accept our offer the official opposition and other party leaders, and will he strike an all-party committee to examine the response to the ice storm so we indeed can get better for the next event? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Leader of the Opposition and the other members of the Legislature from the Opposition and from the third party for their concern about the well-being of those that went through the affected storm. It was a very tough time for the province, and I was so pleased on how New Brunswickers rallied together, communities within the affected areas, regions without power really were resilient, they were inspiring, and they had a strong sense of community. People from outside those regions donated, came in to do door-to-door, did everything they could to assist those that were affected by the ice storm. We've made it very clear that we have been very impressed with the response from volunteers, from all the instances, the emergencies measures organizations, NB Power, the crews that came in from outside the province, the contractors that came in from within the province to the region. But we are going to do a review to make sure we understand what went well and what can be done better next time, and I look forward to the results of that review, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier is using the excuse that politicians will not be involved by using the Executive Council office. But everyone knows that the office answers to the Premier. Once already, the Gallant government has used the Executive office to interfere politically with an inquiry. I refer, of course, to the Auditor General's first ACON report, where she found that the current Health Minister did not have the authority to sign over $50 million worth of creditor status to the Bank of Nova Scotia. Even though she had expert legal opinion backing her findings, the Gallant government disagreed with her findings via the Executive Council. What would the implications have been had the Auditor General's findings been allowed to stand? Can the Premier answer that, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, we have requested that a review be done because we know that we were put to the test. We know that this was certainly one of the worst natural disasters that we had to go through, Mr. Speaker, as a province, so we owe it to ourselves to review, to see what went well and what could go better next time. Mr. Speaker, I really hope that the Leader of the Opposition is not questioning the credibility of the most senior civil servant within the government, a woman who has been working in the civil service for many years now, has done a great job. She has worked under different governments, Mr. Speaker. We believe that she's going to do a great job in making sure that we analyze what went well and what could go better next time with regards to the response to the ice storm that we recently went through. I do have a question for the Leader of the Opposition, though. What response did his government put in place? What review did his government put in place, I should say, when Arthur came to town, Mr. Speaker? I'd like to know what review they put in place and how it differs from ours.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The latest embarrassment for our government from the soaring economy, 3,000 job ad campaign, landed on social media again yesterday. A picture of a sign in Toronto Airport bathroom saying, "Wash your hands of any doubt. New Brunswick is on the move. 3,000 jobs." On Wednesday, the Premier admitted the Jobs website is flawed and inaccurate. Will he immediately order suspension and cancellation of this false and ridiculous advertising campaign before it causes further damage to New Brunswick's credibility? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, every day I can't understand the words coming out of the Leader of the Opposition's mouth. It was their government that put nbjobs.ca in place. So all the words that he just used, he should look to his right and talk to the MLA from Fredericton or Mukto Lincoln, Mr. Speaker, and say that his program, nbjobs.ca, in which I was there when he launched it and congratulated him and said when I became Premier that I thought it was a good initiative, a good program, and we continue it. He should, the Leader of the Opposition, turn to his colleague and say that it's a ridiculous program and initiative, Mr. Speaker. In fact, it is not. It is very helpful. It is helping us make sure we have a strong workforce, Mr. Speaker, by trying to fill gaps, giving employers a way to communicate where there's opportunity, giving those that want to stay in the province and come back to the province, Mr. Speaker, a chance to see what opportunities are there for them. Mr. Speaker, we've made improvements. We'll continue to improve nbjobs.ca, but we're proud that the word's getting out across the country that there's opportunity here in New Brunswick.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the Premier clearly does not care about accuracy. Again, on page 10 of the non-political, fact-based 2017-18 Economic Outlook, we find a graph that indicates 3 years of negative employment growth in the province. Minus 0.2% in 2014, minus 0.6% in 2015, and minus 0.1% in 2016. Yet on page 9 of the budget speech, we find a claim, and I quote, "By working together, we have delivered on job creation." Does the Premier not understand all of his government has delivered on job creation is spin? Does the Premier not understand negative employment growth, or are our suspicions accurate that the Premier does not really care about unspun facts and reality? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, nous sommes très fiers du fait que l'économie du Nouveau-Brunswick a cru à un rythme très important en 2015. En effet, c'était le taux de croissance la troisième plus importante au Canada. Depuis, Monsieur le Président, c'était le taux de croissance le plus important que nous avons vu ici au Nouveau-Brunswick depuis 2004. Alors, nous sommes très fiers du fait que l'économie a cru à un rythme important en 2015. L'économie a cru encore, pas un rythme autant qu'on aimerait, Monsieur le Président, mais a cru encore en 2016, a cru encore en 2017, Monsieur le Président, et estimé en 2017, je devrais dire. Alors, nous sommes très fiers du fait que l'économie est à sa plus forte qu'on a vue depuis longtemps, si pas jamais, Monsieur le Président, ici au Nouveau-Brunswick. Nous voyons du momentum lorsque ça vient à la création d'emplois. En effet, depuis juin de l'an passé, Monsieur le Président, au-delà de 5 000 emplois, un gain net à notre économie. Alors, il y a du momentum, l'économie est en train de croître et nous travaillons fort pour faire d'autres investissements pour continuer ce momentum, Monsieur le Président.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, on page 6 of the Economic Outlook, we see the graph on 2017 real GDP projections. Of the 10 provinces, New Brunswick is 9th. Only Newfoundland has a worse projection. Yet on the ridiculous advertising campaign we were discussing earlier, it states New Brunswick is a growth leader. One spot out of dead last in Canada is being spun as a growth leader, Mr. Speaker. Maybe we just set our sights too low. Does the Premier think nobody else in Canada reads the growth projection? Doesn't he think the false advertising campaign will make us a laughingstock? Or does he truly not care about accuracy and facts, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, in 2015, we were the third best province in the country when it came to economic growth. 2016, it is estimated that we grew again, not at the same rhythm, Mr. Speaker, not at the same rate, but we grew again, and it's estimated in 2017 that we would grow again. So on the back of a record-setting year in 2015, New Brunswickers should be proud of what they've done. Well, one person that should not be proud, Mr. Speaker, is the Leader of the Opposition. Let's talk about his GDP growth when he was the failed finance minister, Mr. Speaker. 2011, the GDP grew by 0.2%. 2012, minus 1%. 2013, minus 0.3%, and 2014, minus 0.1%. So, Mr. Speaker, as much as I like to hear from the Leader of the Opposition every single day, we're not going to take any lessons on his approach to grow the economy. He slashed in education, slashed in health care, and shrunk our economy during his 4 years.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
So, Mr. Speaker, once again we see the Premier throwing out numbers as if they're all true. Mr. Speaker, what I'm proud to focus on are the reality of facts, and I will stand any day and go through the actual numbers. The reviews are on the Premier's budget, and it's pretty much unanimous that increasing our net debt another $1 billion this year and $2.4 billion so far in this mandate is absolutely irresponsible. And that doesn't include the number of projects that will hit in later years that are now on the books. Experts and editorials alike also point out that with this huge increase in taxes, over $500 million a year, running a deficit is unforgivable. Again, the Premier does not seem to care. For him, the future ends at the next election date. But I must ask, does the Premier understand what will happen when the interest rates rise? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Premier.
There's lots of points I want to cover here, Mr. Speaker. So he's talking about alternative facts yet again. I think we're going to have a ruling on how we're going to discuss this moving forward, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
No. Leader of the Opposition.
Order. Honourable members.
Order. The Leader of the Opposition is accusing us of alternative facts, is what I'm saying, and I'd like him to clarify the GDP growth that he thinks he did when he was the Minister of Finance in 2011, 12, 13, and 14. I'd want to hear that, and I think New Brunswickers deserve, because he's swatting it down, Mr. Speaker, as if it's not true. He's swatting it down as stats can, as not being true. 0.2% growth in 2011, minus 1% in 2012, minus 0.3% in 2013, minus 0.1% in 2014. I'd like the Leader of the Opposition to get up and say categorically that that's false, that when he was the Finance Minister, he didn't fail in growing the economy, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, earlier this week I asked about how they justified cutting the deficit in half, how that stat that was put on the cover page actually worked mathematically. I was not given an answer, so I would ask that again. Just give us the beginning and the end numbers that you use, with or without the contingency fund. How much information is put in there that actually calculates a deficit cut in half from the beginning of their mandate to today? Mr. Speaker, look at the numbers. We're spinning out the numbers. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Premier.
Well, this whole new politics approach that the failed finance minister says that he's going to bring to the table, I think he would want to clarify his numbers, Mr. Speaker. He says he's bringing numbers. I'm bringing numbers too. So 2011, the economy of New Brunswick under the failed finance minister grew by 0.2%, retracted in 2012 by 1%, retracted in 2013 by 0.3%, retracted in 2014 by 0.1%. So how is it the Leader of the Opposition thinks that he can get up and lecture us when it comes to economic growth, Mr. Speaker? He retracted the economy with his failed policies of cutting into healthcare and education, Mr. Speaker. Nous, on travaille avec les Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickoises. Nous travaillons avec les entreprises, les personnes qui veulent vraiment aider la région, la province pour essayer d'avancer notre économie, Monsieur le Président. Et nous sommes très fiers avec les investissements stratégiques que nous avons vu une croissance record en 2015, d'autres croissances en 2016 et en 2017, Monsieur le Président.
Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay Devin.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, last December the PISA scores were released throughout Canada, and one section below the New Brunswick scores, there was something interesting going on there that I don't think a lot of New Brunswickers knew. The Francophone sector of education in our province is the fastest improving education sector in Canada and the 8th fastest in the world. And these improvements have been over the last 4 years, and I just wanted to, I see this as an achievement, and I'd like to ask the Minister of Education, what is it that the Francophone sector has bought into, or what have they figured out that has helped them improve at such a good rate? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that question, Mr. Speaker. Yes, there are good things to talk about in education, and all we hear in this legislature, Mr. Speaker, is the doom and gloom from the opposition, every day trying to find something. But today, yes, it's good that the member opposite is talking about the test results in the Francophone sector, and yes, they're doing some good work, Mr. Speaker. Teachers are working hard, our students are working hard, and there are some good results that we see some improvements. Mr. Speaker, that's what we're trying to do here on the side of the House, is strive for improvements throughout our whole education system, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're putting, with our 10-year education plans putting forward, we have number of record investments compared to the opposition, Mr. Speaker, when they were government, they cut and slash in education. We have a very good track record on spending and putting the proper resources in place in our education system to move forward, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this year alone, and our Minister of Finance come out with the increases to our education system of $58 million, Mr. Speaker, moving forward. Mr. Speaker,
Time, Minister. Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay Devin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for the Minister, I do believe there's no politics in education. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out here today is I think we have two education systems, and it should be the goal of the province to get them both firing on all cylinders. And something interesting, the Francophone schools in New Brunswick between 2012 and 2015 attained the highest improvement rate in the country. In science, the country improved by 3 points, while New Brunswick's Francophone schools improved by 27. In reading, the country improved by 4, while New Brunswick's Francophone sectors improved by 22. In math, the country decreased its score by 2 points, while New Brunswick's Francophone schools improved by 5. I see this as an achievement. I believe it should be celebrated. I'm questioning why it hasn't been to this date, and I'd like the minister to elaborate on what it is that they're doing different in the Francophone sector so that everyone can benefit from that in New Brunswick.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, as Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development, I take this role as the most important role in our province, Mr. Speaker, as a minister. And I have to say that we're working with the Francophone teachers, working with the Francophone districts. Yes, we have celebrated in those accomplishments, Mr. Speaker. And with the role at the Francophone education, they're taking a community approach to education. They're also working and looking at doing a performance management, Mr. Speaker. And these are some of the things that they're doing in the Francophone sector, that they're doing a very good job, and I want to commend everybody that's involved. But Mr. Speaker, with our education plans moving forward, with what we're doing with preschool autism programs, Mr. Speaker, with the integrated service delivery provincial expansion that we're doing, Mr. Speaker, with daycare assistance programs, with the record investments in education, Mr. Speaker, we're making sure that, yes, our education is going to be working on firing on all cylinders, Mr. Speaker. We're working together, we're working collaboratively with everybody that's involved. It's a community approach, Mr. Speaker, and I do
Minister. Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay Devin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we should raise the level of debate and discussion on this topic, and like the minister, I think education is vital to the future of New Brunswick. And I think right now, what I would like to ask the minister is the same question I've asked the last two questions, but haven't really got an answer. I think it's an achievement. I'm proud of that. I think we all should celebrate in the fact that they're getting something right and they're doing a good job. And I think that the Anglophone sector, their PISA scores, if you look very closely, they kind of went down. And I think it's very important for the Minister of Education to tell the House and tell New Brunswick what they're doing in the other sectors so that both sectors can work together and we can learn from this. So my question is very simple. What are they doing in the Francophone sector of education over the past 4 years that has them improving at such a fast pace? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, we are working together, Mr. Speaker. The Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, along with all stakeholders in all sectors of education, both in the Francophone and Anglophone sector, are working together. We've had extensive consultation. It's the first time in history that the Premier and myself, as Minister of Education, spent the full day with educators from around the province, both in the Francophone and Anglophone sector, to listen to some of the issues and share those best practices that are taking place. So, Mr. Speaker, the education systems are working together. They're sharing best practices, and I want to say, going through the tour of the province and meeting with educators, seeing some of the great things that are happening on innovation, on digital literacy, Mr. Speaker, on the competitive nature of our students in the province actually wanting to strive and move forward. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of good things happening in our education throughout the province, Mr. Speaker, and I want to ask the opposition to continue to actually talk about the good things in education, not point out all the negative things, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister. Member for Fredericton West Hanwell.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Les médias indiquent que Vitalité a présenté le ministre de Santé avec un plan de maintenir le niveau de service en réduisant les coûts sans perdre des emplois et d'économiser des millions de dollars aux contribuables du Nouveau-Brunswick. Est-ce que le ministre a lu ce rapport de Vitalité et est-ce qu'il l'a considéré avant de prendre la décision de privatiser?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, je peux assurer l'opposition que oui, nous avons bel et bien pris en considération les opinions de tous et chacun sur la décision d'aller de l'avant avec un contrat avec la compagnie Sodexo, Monsieur le Président. L'objectif de cet exercice ici, c'est d'améliorer la qualité des soins aux patients dans nos hôpitaux et le faire de façon consistante à travers la province, Monsieur le Président. Ça, c'est le but ultime. C'est de pouvoir offrir un meilleur service à l'ensemble de la population, peu importe dans quel hôpital qu'ils sont dans la province du Nouveau-Brunswick. Et nous pouvons faire ça tout en économisant de l'argent, Monsieur le Président, qui va nous permettre ensuite de prendre ces économies-là et de les réinvestir dans notre système de soins de santé, tel que l'annonce de 200 millions qui a été faite hier par mes collègues, le Premier ministre et le Vice-Premier ministre, dans l'hôpital régional ici à Fredericton, un investissement de 200 millions sur les prochains 8 ans, Monsieur le Président.
Member for Fredericton West Hanwell.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, le report de vitalité permettra de sauver des emplois et d'économiser des millions de dollars aux contribuables du Nouveau-Brunswick et de maintenir et peut-être d'améliorer les services offerts actuellement. Est-ce que le ministre est prêt de déposer et rendre public le report de vitalité?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Again, Mr. Speaker, this whole objective, this initiative, which, by the way, was started under the former government and simply continued by our government because it was an initiative that we felt made sense and was going to provide positive results, Mr. Speaker, is there to improve the quality of service that patients receive when in hospital in the province of New Brunswick, whether it be around environmental, such as cleaning and the cleanliness of the hospitals, the portering services, as well as the food services, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that there's a consistent quality service around the province, Mr. Speaker. And Sodexo is going to be able to do that while actually providing savings which are going to be reinvested into the system. And those savings, Mr. Speaker, are guaranteed by the company. That is something that the Vitalité proposal could not do. They could not guarantee that we were going to get these savings. Sodexo, however, is able to provide that guarantee that we are going to see those savings, and those savings are then going to be...
Time, Minister. Member for Fredericton West Hanwell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, as we've seen a lot from the Gallant government, they're saying one thing and doing another. In this case, the minister's on his feet, and he's telling us the goal of this project is to improve services. And yet we know the goal is actually to save money. And, Mr. Speaker, Vitality Health Board has come forward with a proposal that allows them to both maintain jobs that are present, to improve the quality of service, and to do it at a lesser price. Mr. Speaker, I've asked the Minister twice about this report. Will he now acknowledge this report, acknowledge what's contained in it, and present it publicly, at least to the public, or table it in this House? We want to know what's in that report. We want to know why the Minister is not taking the option provided by the Vitality Health Board.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've acknowledged the report. We looked at the report. We didn't agree with the findings in the report, Mr. Speaker. And again, I want to remind everybody listening and everybody in this chamber that this is an initiative that started under the former government. Started when the member for Rothesay was Minister of Health. There was an RFP that was released in July of 2013. The top-ranked supplier was chosen in January of 2014. A letter was then sent to all bidders in March of 2014, informing them of who the successful bidder was and starting the negotiation process, Mr. Speaker. But then, of course, there was an election. And Tories, being Tories, decided that they were going to toss this aside because they didn't want it to become an election issue, Mr. Speaker. But they never cancelled the process. They never cancelled the RFP. It was simply tossed to aside to be resumed after the election. We see the benefits, Mr. Speaker, and we did continue on this initiative.
Minister, Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it was 3 years ago this week that the former government signed a contract with Jim Irving to provide his company a guaranteed supply of wood from Crown lands for 25 years in an amount of wood that undermined the integrity of our public forest management system. In return for sacrificing the public interest in this way, J.D. Irving would modernize its mills. This included major investment in Phase 3 of the Irving Pulp and Paper modernization in St. John at a cost of $263 million. Can the Minister of Energy and Resource Development tell this legislature if, in fact, J.D. Irving has invested that $263 million in Phase 3 of the mill modernization in St. John, and how many permanent jobs it created?
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Resource Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the member opposite, certainly a pleasure to stand in the House to talk about the forestry sector, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the forestry sector is very vital to the economy. A very strong component for job creation, for helping us get our fiscal house in order and helping us pay for the things that are priorities, such as education and health care, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the questions he's bringing forward are very important to the people in New Brunswick. And yes, everything is on track. Of what I understand, the mills are the number of sizable forest sector investments have materialized in the year since the strategy was released, Mr. Speaker. a number of very significant investments have taken place in the province, with Irving Paper modernization in St. John of $202 million, Mr. Speaker. There's got to be some jobs out of that too, Mr. Speaker. Chipman Mill, Mr. Speaker, $38 million. That's very significant. Kedgwick and St. Leonard, $3.9 million, Mr. Speaker.
Time, Minister. Leader of the third party.
Sounds to me, Mr. Speaker, like Phase 3 hasn't been completed. But let me press on. Mr. Speaker, the former government signed on a contract that accepted J.D. Irving's promised investments in its mills would be predicated on this and future governments assuring the company's competitive wood costs on Crown land. Can the Minister tell this House what steps his government has taken to guarantee competitive wood costs to the J.D. Irving Company?
Honourable Minister of Resource Development.
Mr. Speaker, job creation and economic growth remain very much of a priority of this government. And the safe and responsible development of our natural resources have been identified as very, very much key growth opportunities. Mr. Speaker, there are some challenges out there. We all know there's some tremendous challenges out in all of the sectors that we're dealing with. But with the challenges come some very significant growth opportunities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I was mentioning just a moment ago, not only the Irvings, but also what's taken place with AV Group. AV Group, just to finish, Mr. Speaker, $37 million in investments. Chaleur, $5.5 million in investments. Twin Rivers, $10 million in investments, Mr. Speaker. These are linked to the forest strategy, have materialized, and are on track, Mr. Speaker. These investments continue to support employment opportunities in many of the forestry communities in the province, Mr. Speaker. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, a fact of the matter is that many of those jobs are in rural New Brunswick.
Time, Minister. Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, when I asked questions like this last year, J.D. Irving took out a full-page ad in the paper and answered them. So maybe he'll do that again so I can get the actual answers to my questions. Monsieur le Président, le contrat signé avec Jim Irving par l'ancien gouvernement a aussi légalement tenu le gouvernement actuel ainsi que les gouvernements futurs à réduire les coûts des opérations forestières de Irving dans la province. Est-ce que le ministre peut expliquer quelle démarche ce gouvernement a pris pour réduire les coûts des opérations forestières d'Irving dans la province?
Honourable Minister of Resource Development.
Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned there a few moments ago, job creation is the #1 priority of this government. Getting our fiscal house in order and helping to pay for health care and education are priorities. Mr. Speaker, the forestry industry, I'm very proud to say on the floor of this legislature, is part of that plan, part of the economic development, and part of the growth in this province, Mr. Speaker. It's been a pillar, a very solid pillar for many, many years, Mr. Speaker. It's part of our growth and it's part of our economic development plans as we go forward. So, Mr. Speaker, as I was mentioning, all of the work is on track, all of the investments are on track, and I mentioned just a few of the mills, Mr. Speaker. That's not talking about the investments in the woods. It's not talking a thing about the investments in the woods. But, Mr. Speaker, trees are everything. What's taking place, trees are everything. And the value that we can get out of our fiber is so very important, Mr. Speaker. And the mills that are producing in this province are creating some tremendous jobs, and they're also creating some very tremendous products, Mr. Speaker. There's mills that are producing some tremendous fiber.
Minister. Member for Fredericton York.
Mr. Speaker, on January 18th, Opportunities New Brunswick appeared before the Legislature's Standing Committee on Crown Corporations. This was the first opportunity to examine the performance of this particular Crown Corporation. Unfortunately, the head of Opportunities New Brunswick did not provide the information we requested on actual jobs created. I am sure the Minister has been briefed on this and has now been provided with some real data on the performance of Opportunities New Brunswick. Can the Minister advise the House how many companies receiving government assistance are behind on their commitment to have jobs created? It would seem to me that most departments are now specializing in alternative facts.
Recognize the Minister.
Monsieur le Président, je suis très heureuse de me lever et de parler des excellents résultats qu'Opportunité Nouveau-Brunswick a eu pendant l'année 2015-2016. Et Opportunité Nouveau-Brunswick a également eu la chance de présenter ses résultats. On avait un objectif de créer 1500 emplois et Opportunité Nouveau-Brunswick a démontré qu'ils avaient créé 2965 emplois, donc dépassé de plus de 50% l'objectif qu'il s'était créé, qui avait été créé. Un résultat également qui a apporté 288 millions de dollars sur l'économie du Nouveau-Brunswick. Et je pense que Opportunité Nouveau-Brunswick a fait un excellent travail tout au long de l'année pour justement aller chercher ces emplois-là qui sont la priorité de notre gouvernement, tout comme l'éducation et la santé.
Time for question period has expired. Tabling of